Okay, here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
John, good? Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name's Tom Higgins. I love asking questions. I love getting to know the story behind the person. I live with my wife Mandy on Madison Street. We've been in Chelsea for about 23 years. And I'm excited for today to talk to our guest today. And next month, Jim Alford, who's in the audience, will be my guest. And I'm excited to get to know Jim as well. Jim's on his way to go meet the basketball team when they get off the bus today. So
Which basketball team would that be?
So it's fun getting to know today's guest, like I do today. About 10 years ago or so, Mandy and I were sitting on our front porch, and it was a warm June day. We were drinking wine and just kind of enjoying ourselves. And this nice woman was walking down the street, and she struck up a conversation with us and said that she liked our house or something like that. And it must have been that and the wine. And she said, "How would you love to be on a historic home tour in December?" And since it seemed like it was years away and we were drinking wine, we said, "No problem." So all these years later, it's funny to recount that day, all the work that was involved in getting our house ready for the home tour that someone talked us into. Please join me in welcoming Jan Bernath. Now I have notes, but do you have something you want to start with?
No.
Okay, we'll jump in at any time.
If it gets stuck, I was going to refer to my notes.
You will not get stuck. There's so many things that I could talk about with you, and in no particular order, I'm going to start with advocacy, being an advocate, because that's a way that I see you. You're often championing a cause or defending something. And before we get into some of those specific examples, I'm wondering where that came from in you. I mean, I know you told me a story that we can talk about in Mason, but was that something that was from your childhood, or your parents were like this?
No, my parents were not like that. They probably would have been embarrassed by that. No, it was, I think my first experience was when we were living in Oxford, Ohio, and that was during the Vietnam War. And I remember standing on the village green. There is a little village green in the middle of pristine Oxford, Ohio. Miami University is there. And standing with my toddler in protest of the Vietnam War. Yeah. So that was my first time out.
Doing the right thing.
Well, it felt like it.
Yeah. So then a little bit later in life, a story that you told me that sticks with me is, it sounds so simple in a way, but it felt like you said to me, it showed you that civic engagement makes a difference, and this is your Mason landlord.
Yes.
I don't know if that's a story that you want to tell.
Well, it's kind of fun. So I spent a period of my life in Mason, Michigan, and I happened to live right downtown, 1 block off the courthouse square. And there was on that block was a judge's house. He had 10 children, and I think they all felt like they owned the place. I won't name it, but anyway, they felt very entitled. But one of the kids, he must have been about midway in the pack, bought old houses. They were all old in Central Mason. And he just rented them and rented them and rented them and never did anything in terms of providing upkeep. So over time, this area of historic homes surrounding the courthouse square became dilapidated, and I happened to live there. And at one point, it wasn't my idea. We had a civic group who was working on establishing criteria for having yards that were acceptable. In other words, you have to get 3 cars out from the front of the house. You can no longer leave those there, they're rotting, and so over time, we were able to get yard ordinances in place. And after a while, he decided he didn't want to live in Mason anymore, because people were, you know, like, we all knew who owned those houses, and people were not happy about his behavior, so he left town. And that was how I knew, oh my gosh, this was really very much something that I had been involved in. I mean, it was much more direct than, say, the Vietnam War.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. It's like us right now, we're protesting, but, you know, we're wondering if it, you know, what it does exactly.
Yes.
Or does it have a direct impact?
Right.
But getting the landlord to be held accountable
Yes.
is another story.
Yes, yes.
So many other stories about advocacy that I can bring up, but jump in at any time if you want. I mean, when you moved back to Chelsea, this was around the Iraq War was starting, and there was protesting about that as well.
Yes,
So
yes.
you were involved in that.
Yeah, in fact, I had moved around a lot, but my parents had remained living in Chelsea, and so I saw how Chelsea was changing and evolving. And it was evolving in ways that matched what I valued. And one of the things I saw online was this, it turns out to be a 7-year-long protest in front of the post office against the Iraq War. And I remember I was in church on Sunday, and I was so upset what was happening. And I turned around to the person behind me and I said, I think I have to go uptown and protest. So then I became involved in that, but it really went on for 7 years.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
where the old post office was in
Old
town.
post office, yeah, it was.
You also were involved in Preservation Chelsea, or preserving historic buildings.
Yes, John Frank and John and Jackie Frank, who restored the house on East Middle Street, which had been all chopped up into offices, were longtime preservationists I think in Kentucky or someplace prior to moving to Chelsea. And so I got to know them actually before I moved here, because they had a birthday party for people who were born in their house when it was a hospital there.
Oh.
So they had a birthday party, and that just sort of caught my attention. I thought, how cool is that?
Yes.
And then from there, John was really a motivator, and you know, I began appreciating what he was doing in town. First of all, to their house, but then secondly, just the ripple effects of, you know, you have one house that goes back together. In fact, I know that his house was a twin to the house of the B&B on East Middle. And so Jim Miles and John Frank were undergoing these huge rehabilitations of these houses, and it was pretty compelling, and I appreciated what they were doing, and so I got involved in the bigger effort. And the bigger effort at that point was the Longworth property, which is on the corner of Jackson and Maine, had been was purchased by the DDA, and I think the vision of the DDA was that it becomes a parking lot. That was a lot of frontage on Jackson Street.
So this is the livery, the
Mac
building, and then the Daniels something?
The showroom, yeah.
Okay.
There was this lovely Art Deco showroom which was on the front of that whole complex that was just done in tile. It was absolutely beautiful. And I remember going to many meetings, and I heard that the vision was, because riding the train from Chelsea to Ann Arbor and Detroit was going to become very fashionable again, that we needed a lot of parking lot for all those riders. They were going to catch the ride from Chelsea into Detroit and Chicago, apparently. So that didn't make too much sense. But I remember going to, we had a massive, you know how we have Sounds and Sights on Thursday nights in the summer? Well, a bunch of us went around and put little sign-up sheets and said, do you think we should keep the Longworth property and develop the Longworth property or not? We didn't care if people lived here. We just cared about the public sentiment of people coming into Chelsea. People come into Chelsea because they like the old stuff, right? They like historic buildings. Well, so we collected a massive amount of signatures.
And the idea was to present a volume of support.
Yes, yes, and we had the State of Michigan Preservation Network on board advocating with us. And so Janet stood up and she made this big speech, and then the second in line got up and made this big speech, and I stood up, and the mayor said, "Sit down, Janet." Not her, she said, "Jan, sit down, Jan, we know what you're gonna say." And I said, "Actually, you don't. I have a whole bunch of signatures here," and I marched up there and I put them on her desk.
Her.
Yeah, her.
That was one of the stories that I was hoping you were gonna tell. That's a great one.
Yeah, yeah.
Sit down and shut up, Jan, that's great. But one of the things you also made clear to me that I didn't realize, even though I appreciated multiple times a week, is that advocacy by you and other people made Agricole the possibility that it is today.
I am convinced that had we not raised a big stink, that it would have gone down with the other two buildings.
And that is it's so much more than a coffee shop, it's a meeting spot,
Right.
it means so much to our community to have that, and it's neat to think back that you had a
Right.
hand in saving it, or
Right.
making it possible.
And Joe Zwolowski, I mean, he said, I kept driving by that building, hoping somebody would do something, nobody did anything.
Mhm.
So Joe said, if not me, then who? And he really spearheaded that. But it had been let go so long that it was just the exterior walls that were remaining, none of the infrastructure inside. So it was a massive job to bring that to what it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said that one of the deciding factors for coming back to Chelsea, we'll get into your story a little bit more in a second, was that you could see that advocacy in general could happen here.
Yes.
Meaning, everything that we just talked about.
Yeah.
You saw that this was a progressive town or
Right.
forward-thinking town.
Yeah, I mean, the protest in front of the post office did catch my eye, because that was online. It was called Canopus, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to look it up, but it was Canopus is what it was, and it lasted for 7 years.
So let's talk about Chelsea. This is my next category that I thought about with you. And I think everyone thinks Jan was born in Chelsea, and then you moved away and you came back home because this was your home.
Right,
But that's not the story, is it?
no.
Tell us the story.
I didn't come back home because home no longer existed. I left in '58. And so, but since my folks were here, I knew how Chelsea was evolving. And I appreciated those things that came on board during my absence. Yeah, so I came here because it had turned into a community that I wanted to live in.
You said so many wonderful things when we visited, and I loved hearing that, because this is where I chose my home to be, and you actually objectively decided to come here because of all the good things you saw in it.
Yes, yeah,
Which is neat.
yeah.
So what I don't know a whole lot about is, well, Jan was born in the hospital, which is turned into the John and Jackie Frank house, which is, it's such a great story. I didn't know about the birthday parties.
Oh, yeah,
What
yeah.
a fun thing.
Yeah, it was fun, yeah.
I don't know, were you an only child, or were?
Yes, I was born in 1940, and my mother had another child when I was 3, but that child, full term, died in the birth process. And so she was told not to attempt to have any of the other children.
I see.
So I was, by default, the only kid.
Okay, I
I didn't like it. Sandy loved it. I didn't like it at all.
Sandy Weber is Jan's longtime friend.
Yes.
We knew each other, what, 3 months, 5 months old? At least I assume we knew each other at that point.
I think our mothers did. We
They
didn't.
do.
We didn't get it.
We had two side-by-side strollers.
By the way, one of the things a friend said to me about you, it may or may not have been Sandra, is your energy is just off the charts, and it's hard to keep up with you. Someone who might be the same age said that.
No, I think that was from 20 years ago.
I don't think so. That's not what they told me. One of the things you told me was about your grandparents and how important they were.
Yes.
The quote that I wrote down was, you said, "This is how I learned."
The importance of grandparenthood, yes. So my grandparents were from Ohio, and somebody had a good idea to go out to Kansas and buy a farm. Well, we had the Depression in the Dust Bowl. My grandmother had an uncle who owned an electronics store in Chelsea, and he was able to secure jobs for both of them at the Methodist home. So Granddad ran all the mechanics, and Grandma ran the iron. So, and I would go down, there was a, what do you call it? Where it's halfway below ground level.
Garden.
Garden, yes, a garden apartment. They had a garden apartment as part of their pay, I guess. And so I would go down there and stay, and they had 2 overstuffed chairs, and they would put me together. They'd put me in the chairs that were together, and I started sleeping down there when I was 2.
You told me.
I outgrew the chairs.
You told me you absorbed
Oh, yes.
from them.
Yes, yeah. They were just really important in my life, yeah.
It's really neat. I think about this. Last month I had Linda Smith that I interviewed.
Yes.
She talked about a couple things. She said, I wanted to learn all of the stories from her grandparents. And it makes me realize how important grandparents are
Yes.
when you hear these kind of stories.
Yeah,
So you did something crazy more than once. But I know one that happened when you were 4 years old.
Oh, yes. Yes. So,
You have to describe where you lived.
yeah. Do you know where McKinley Street is?
So just by North Creek, kind of. North
Yeah,
Creek School, kind
yeah.
of.
Anyway, so before, we always lived in rented places until my dad was able to build a house on Sibley Road when I was 8. But prior to that, we lived in all these different rented places. One of the places was on McKinley Street. And evidently, and I mean, I still do own the fact that I am crazy about ice cream. And so I just had an idea that I wanted to get an ice cream cone, and I walked uptown. Huh?
At what age?
At 4. I was 4, and which meant I had to go, how many blocks, over the tracks and hang a right, and over so many blocks, and then there was a stop sign, I think, hanging inside, in the middle of the street, wasn't it? It wasn't on the side, it was just in the middle of the street. So I had to negotiate that, and I made it over to where Zuzu's is now, when it was a drugstore with a soda fountain. and I ordered an ice cream. And she gave it to me, but she also knew who my mother was. So she called Mom, who had to, come and pay for it. Yeah.
This wasn't planned, but maybe this is a good time to tell the Helen Vogel story.
There are a couple of those.
Well, there's the one from when you were in Chelsea, and then when you went to East Lansing.
Yes. So,
I can prompt you more if you want.
well, yeah, do.
So
What did I say?
When you were living in Chelsea and you would maybe go to the gas station
Oh, yeah.
or you go to the grocery store, you would just walk in and say,
Fill it up.
put it on my account.
Yeah, yeah.
And then later,
Yeah.
a little later in life, you were in Michigan State and you were going to get a dress at Jacobson's.
Jacobs, yeah.
Take it from there.
So yeah, I mean, when I bought anything at Helen Vogel's, I would have gotten permission from my parents that I could go buy blah, blah. I would buy that and Helen Vogel would write it down on a little index card and put it in, a little card holder. And then it would magically be paid for. And the same thing was true with the gas station. My dad, I guess, paid for that. And so I had no idea when I went to Michigan State what credit was about. I thought you just walked in. And that's what I did. I did that. I walked into Jacobson's and said, put it on my account. And they wrote my parents. I mean, they were obliging me, right? But yeah, so they wrote my parents who put it into that.
That's such a sweet, innocent story.
Well, Chelsea was very sweet and innocent.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there were lots of things, I know there were lots of things that were undercurrent, but for me living on top of it, and everything was just pretty pleasant, idyllic.
How are we doing, Jan? You having a good time?
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Jan?
I do.
Go ahead, David.
So thank you for sharing visually your grandparents and those other times. A lot of times when we compare the present to the past, the present always wins. We don't have to worry about polio, we've got food, we have electricity. How do you view the current world and the present against some of the past? How do you reconcile? How do you calm yourself down, as an example?
Well, the first time I knew there was trouble in River City was when I went to Miami University, and there was, wait a minute. I knew there was more trouble than I was aware of growing up when I moved to Canada. And we were the only Americans in this group of students and student families. So I got exposed to opinions of others in the world, like there were people from New Zealand, Australia, Great Britain, Germany. So the first time I ever even heard of Vietnam was actually from an Irish guy. So this idea of an international perspective was my first glimpse of it. So how do I reconcile then and now? I mean, I think I became aware of that, when I was 24, So I think it's a condition of just being aware of what's going on, and it is troubling at every step, really. Now it's really scary, but it's been very scary before. And I think we will come out of this. I don't know in what shape, I don't know how long, but I do know that the present is not as it's going to be necessarily.
Thank you, that's
Yeah.
helpful.
That's a great question, and it'll lead into something that I was going to ask you about or talk about. there's a theme of fragility throughout your life, and that sounds sad, but it's also at times was motivating for you. Like you leapt at things that were presented to you,
Yeah,
and so you recognize the fragility of life.
yes.
At 27 was maybe the first time that
First
you
time I
shared
moved,
with me.
Yeah. So we were moving from Edmonton, Alberta to Miami University in Southern Ohio. And at that, my son was born when we lived in Alberta. And he was 3 months old or 4 months old. And I stayed, my husband at the time had to leave to go to his job in Southern Ohio. And my son was ill, which we thought was the flu. And so I stayed behind. And I called Dr. Fisher, who was my doctor as growing up, and he came up to his office on a Saturday and met me there. And he said, I can't take care of this. You've got to go to St. Joe's. So my dad picked me up and we went to St. Joe's, and St. Joe's said, can't take care of this. You've got to go to the University of Michigan. So at University of Michigan, it finally was determined that Andrew had a disease that only 100 children in the world had ever been reported. We're talking very rare. So I think at that point I knew how whatever you had could get shaken and taken away potentially.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so on maybe the more positive side of the fragility, later in life, there was a German exchange teaching program
Yeah. Yeah.
that you said something about you just got to grab onto life
Yeah.
and go for it.
Right. Yeah. A friend of mine, I was walking the walk, as I know many do, of a good friend who has cancer, and I was walking that walk with her. And a colleague, several offices down, came up to me and said, Jan, there's this German exchange program that I'm thinking of going on, teacher exchange program. Will you go with me? And I said, you know what? You just cannot watch what I am watching and say no. You just can't watch. So I went. Yeah.
And I don't know if this was related to fragility or this was that you had some bonus credit card miles. But maybe tell that story.
Oh, yeah.
Help clear that up for me.
So when was this? In
2000.
1990s, oh, 2000?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had, you know how you get credit? Some people just want to, get the lowest price they can, or people want to get the credit card miles for fly miles. Well, I had 2 credit cards. They both had fly miles, and they became the same credit card. That they merged. So all of a sudden, I had all these credit card fly miles, and I'm going like, oh my word, I could go to Australia. So I did that.
That's great. You went to New Zealand, Australia,
Yeah.
on New Year's Eve.
Yeah. Oh, New Zealand. Yeah. Yeah. So at first I went to New Zealand, and I always thought, because it's down there, it's pretty close to each other. Wrong. But the interesting thing is that because I had all these miles, I qualified for first class. So I went, and I think that's the only way you could do it. It's so bloody far. Yeah.
That's a great story. Okay, let's talk about your family. So you eventually left for college, you went to Michigan State, and you were studying to become a speech therapist.
Right.
And then you met your husband and you got a special degree.
Called putting a PhD.
PhD.
PhD, putting hubby through. And we all knew that's what it was called. You know, it didn't matter what the degree was. If it was a higher degree, you were doing it. You were putting.
I never heard that before, it's great. And as you said, you moved a lot. This
Yeah.
is what I have.
Yeah.
You want me to read it off? Or you, East Lansing, Miami University, Edmonton, back to Miami University, up to Winnipeg, Springfield, Illinois, then to Mason, Michigan,
Right.
and then Chelsea.
Right.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah.
So, you have 2 children, Andrew and Megan,
Yes.
and 2 grandchildren.
Right. I'm doing my best to be a good grandma.
You know, Jan and I have been Facebook friends for a while, and I love seeing that you're in their life, or vice versa, quite a bit. So, you seem to be very connected with them, and that looks like that they enjoy that as well.
I think so.
And doesn't one of them go to Miami University?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah. Then my daughter did too. So this
That-
is 4th generation now.
Okay, I'm kind of whipping through it because I feel like there's so much more to talk about, and then okay, we're doing fine.
Okay.
Writing is another big thing.
Yes.
It's a big theme that I identified in your life, and you've got some great stories. You told me that your mom was also a writer, and that a doctor, I'm sure I have this wrong somewhat, but a doctor suggested it might be good for their minds
Yes.
long ago to write.
Yes.
I don't know.
I don't know what, it was somebody in Chelsea, a doctor in Chelsea, one of the early ones, I guess, who, I think he actually talked to the senior center and said, you know, you might consider having a writing program for seniors because it's a good way for them to sort of look back over their lives, sort of settle some stuff, make up stuff, you know, do all that stuff. And and I found it to be very helpful over time too.
So what I learned about Jan is that she has her laptop closed next to her comfy chair, and she will open her laptop and just crank out stories or memories. And one of the ones she read to me was a story that I would call Mr. Natural.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Could you tell some part of that story?
Yes.
Or I can set it up if you want.
Well, no, David, you weren't there at the time, but there were, the prompt, in this writing group, which we have now, is, there's always a prompt or 2, maybe 3. You don't have to write to those prompts, but it's suggested. And if you can't, just bring whatever you've written. And so it was embarrassment was the prompt, right? About something
Yes.
that was embarrassing. So I needed to have my floors. First of all, I stayed in the house 1 block off the courthouse square for a long time, and it was getting time to have the downstairs floors refinished. And so I contracted this guy who's going to do the work, called Mr. Natural. And so that should have been a hint right there, right? Anyway, so we pushed everything into the dining room, and with the big old piano had to go there. The radiators had to go in there. It was awful. Anyway, so I was gone, and Mr. Natural was doing the work while I was gone, so I wouldn't ingest all that stuff. And I came back, and he was there right away. He was at the back door, and he collected his fee. Well, I should not have done that, but I did it anyway. And it was 2 days after I got home, I went out onto the floor. They look beautiful. Went out into the floor, and it was so gritty. We were terrible. It was a terrible finish. So I just felt like, oh man, I'm out this money. And I thought, no, I don't think so. So I took him to small claims court. And at the time, so I'm on this end of the field. It felt like a football field. I'm on this end of the field.
I forgot the punchline until just now. This is great. Keep going.
I'm on over here, the toilet is on the other side of the field. Mr. Natural is on the 50-yard line, and I'm trying not to look at him because I delayed having to go to the bathroom, but I had to go. So I went walking across this football field, and halfway through, my half slip fell down around my ankles. And he's right there. So I went, and I caught it and took it into the bathroom. It was the only way I could do it.
So it was embarrassing for a little while.
Yeah.
Until the verdict came down.
Yes, and it ruled in my favor, so I got my money back. And I had it done by somebody else.
That is a great story. And so I want to talk more about writing because that really is a big part of who you are or what you've accomplished. In the 70s in Winnipeg, you had a cabin in northern Michigan, northern Minnesota.
Right.
That was in your husband's family, now it's in your family. You talked about cold winters and writing in the cabin. If I have that right.
No,
Writing in the Minnesota cabin.
right, yeah, well, so because I had moved so many times, I began to feel a little unmoored. Like, geez, I don't really have a home, you know? And so I think it was when I was in Winnipeg that I would begin to write kind of a longing to be home. It was sort of an outlet, way for me to put some words around this. And so that probably started it, for the most part. Yeah, and then there was a time in my life that writing became a necessity for me. It was no longer, you know, kind of these distant feelings and putting words to the feelings, but then it became a necessity for me in that my son died on a country road 3 miles from our house. He was on his way to go decorate the homecoming float. His tennis partner was driving, and the tennis partner lost control of the car. And both kids were, why they didn't have seatbelts, it wasn't my car, I mean, why didn't they have seatbelts on? I taught them that, I taught Andrew that. Why? I don't know why. Anyway, both kids were thrown from the car, and the car landed on my son. And the driver walked away. So, and it was about that time in my life when I was finally getting back to thinking about how I could interact with the world in a productive way. And by that I meant I was going to go back to school, and I did that. But because I had a master's degree, I almost earned it prematurely, so that nobody was really wanting to hire people with master's degrees. School systems would rather hire you without a master's degree and eventually get it. But anyway, so where am I going?
So you wrote to cope, basically.
I wrote, I know what it was.
Yeah.
I couldn't get a full-time job, so I got three part-time jobs. And so it was a blessing for me to have this time in between jobs. So I would be, say I was up in Hazlet, and I was on my way to my second job in Lansing. So I would be writing, I would just cry, write, go to my next job, and repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a way I had to put my grief somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's hard, to hear that story and not, not talk more about that. But I have some idea of the pain that you went through and how the writing helped you at least get it out of your head temporarily.
Yeah, I had to put it somewhere. So I had it all over on scrap paper.
And then you eventually did a book of some sort,
Yeah.
called the Andrews book.
I call it Notes to My Son Andrew.
Notes to My Son Andrew.
Yeah.
So, writing also continued to be a big part of your life. I mean, it is today, but as you did all this international travel, you started doing journal entries, which became
Yes.
kind of your writing.
Yes, I mean, I wasn't doing any kind of, I was mostly documenting the work I was doing and the impressions I had, that sort of thing. It was like diary writing, only it was about international work, yeah.
And then maybe to close the writing chapter, so your mom started the group?
No, Mom didn't start the group. She was a member of the first group. That had been.
So sorry.
It's all right. She was a member of the group that had been suggested by the doctor and that began to be put together at the senior center. But when I moved back to town, I'm going like, gee, whatever happened to that writing group? I don't know. And so over time, I thought, well, maybe there's a place for it again.
Mhm.
So we started maybe about 5 years ago.
And that this is once a month?
Once a month. Yeah, now there's probably about 15 people loosely who are members, but not everybody is there at the same time. So it's more like we would have 12 people now. It's 12 people
Okay.
show up, yeah.
There's a huge chunk on your international life, your travel, and where do I begin? You did so many things. We mentioned the German exchange teacher program. Maybe tell the story in Hungary. This might sound like a morbid story at first about how your mom fell, but then
Oh, yes.
the magical way that you got home.
Yes.
Do you want me to set it up a little bit?
Well, no, I mean, so I was there, I was in Budapest because we had just done, I was invited, no, I applied to this group of international teachers that was funded it was going to be in 19 Eastern Bloc countries. And so it was staffed by the International Reading Association members and funded by George Soros. Because Soros, you may recall, became a victim of communism. He watched it roll into his town. And so he still is involved in a lot of international development. And so I had to go there for the training, and I stayed a few days afterward. I met a friend there, and so I'd gotten this phone call from this friend of mine who said, geez, your mom has fallen. I don't think you need to come back now, but you just need to know that she fell. Be prepared for when you do get home that she might be in rough shape or something like that. So my friend and I went out to eat. We're walking down the street. Now we're in Budapest. I mean, they're tall buildings, you know, these big old communist block buildings, and walking down the street, and I'm using this opening. There is a little brass plaque on the outside of one of these buildings that said, or the gate to one of these buildings, it said, Open Society Institute. Well, that was Soros's organization. Yeah. So I'm like, it's 8 o'clock at night, 8:30 at night. I'm like, what are the chances? So we start walking in there anyway. Woman comes out. Hi. Okay. By the way, I'm wondering about the situation I have. Come in. She is the coordinator for the whole thing in Eastern Europe. So just happened into her office, and she looks at me and she said, if you think you will need to go home, do it now. I can call New York, because the time change, I'll get you on a plane. And within 3 hours, I was on my way back.
Amazing.
I mean, the serendipity of that was incredible. It was
Wow.
incredible.
Did you ever count the number of countries that you have traveled to?
No, but my granddaughters know.
I would love to know what that is.
I don't know.
So you did spend a lot of time in this post-Soviet countries. I know you spent a lot of time in Georgia. I don't know if you want to tell any stories about you and Barbie over there.
So we worked in teams of 4, and the first country I worked in was the country of Georgia. And think Black Sea, Caspian Sea, think southern, just go south from Russia, anyway. And by and large, they're pretty dark-haired folks. And my teaching partner was a flaming blonde. It's so cute. I mean, really very smart young woman, but so cute. I mean, I kept calling her Barbie under my breath, you know. But I think the funniest story about Barbie was when, after that whole Georgia thing was over, Barbie and I were invited to be a part of a team that went to Pakistan. And we were in the other 2 members of the team, one was Australian and one was Canadian. Okay, but because Barbie and I had worked together, we were this
Susan.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Susan. It was Susan. Bless her heart, she's so smart. Anyway, so we flew into Karachi, Pakistan, and I had a phone number that we were to call when we got at the airport. Well, first of all, somebody was supposed to be there to pick us up, right? They weren't. So then I had this phone number to call. Nobody answered. I mean, nobody answered. We are there for probably 2 or 3 hours. Now, Susan had not read the memo about do not have bare legs and you must have a sweater on your arms to cover your arms. She's there, you know, she's so cute. And of course the guys are looking at her. And finally I said, Susan, just go, here's a sweater. Go in the bathroom, put this on and come out then. So the thing was, nobody picked us up, nobody was answering the phone. So I said, we're gonna go over and see that bus over there. We're gonna go over to that bus because it is going to take us, to a hotel. So we walked in the hotel. Now, we didn't know where the hotel was. We had no idea. But this went to the Marriott Hotel in Karachi. So I had a Marriott Hotel frequent flyer mile thing, you know. So I go in there and I said, we should have 2 rooms here. And they said, no, we should have 1 room. We're sharing a room. And he said, no, you each have a room. So it was just by chance.
That was the hotel you had the reservation in?
Well, we didn't know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right, you didn't know.
We didn't know. It was just, it was really quite remarkable. And the thing about in Karachi, whereas in Georgia, there were like 2 sleepy guards, you know, sitting in the entryway with pistols, you know, kind of over here. But in Karachi, they're sitting there with machine guns at the beginning, the entry to the hotel.
Oh, the hotel.
Yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna rattle off some names or some countries, and you can talk about any of them if you want. I'm just doing it in the interest of time. You talk about Pakistan, Estonia, Edinburgh, Finland, Macedonia, Vietnam, semester at sea, elephants. I don't know whether you want to talk about any of those or we can move on to something else.
What do you think is interesting?
Well, I think the Dalai Lama story was, I mean, she met Dalai Lama.
Yeah,
That
that was on, yeah, so there's this program that I think it's still functioning. It's called Semester at Sea, where undergrads go for a semester around the world. And I thought, well, I don't want to go around the world. I just want to go for a while. So I flew out to Singapore and got on the ship and then took it all the way to Cape Town. But the Desmond Tutu.
Dalai Lama. Oh,
Well,
I wrote it down wrong.
Yeah, Desmond Tutu was on it. And he was on the whole semester.
Oh, yeah, I guess I screwed that up.
Yeah.
Well, and then it was in a small room. People got to meet him.
Oh, yes, everybody, yeah, he made appointments. I mean, he had office hours on the ship, so you could go and meet him, yeah,
That was really neat.
yeah.
I want to move over to art for a second. First of all, is there something that you want to tell a story about that I haven't asked you yet? You got like a little packet of notes there. Okay. Well, writing is art. You also got involved in clay.
Yes,
I don't know if you guys knew this, that she was into pottery.
yeah, so I had a diversion. This was when we moved to Springfield. Yes, we moved to Springfield, and there was an art association there. And so I thought, well, clay, that'll be fun. So I took lessons there, and then
Can I interrupt you? Finish this with the nylon story,
Oh, yeah.
please.
Okay. So I,
Sorry. Art association.
All right, so I took lessons, and then I was very ambitious, and I made 12 place settings, dinner plates, dessert plates, bowls, all the stuff. And they said, well, we think that you have gotten too big for us. So I opened a studio in my basement. Now I lived in a very boring brick subdivision, and I was so happy that it became alive because I taught people there. I played around with clay myself. And the thing about if you play around in clay yourself or any other hobby like that, you can't give it away. You know, your friends are tired of these pots. So you are forced to sell. And I hated that. But then, so that was in Springfield. So when we moved to Mason then, there was one other potter in town. And so she and I worked together for a while over in her house, her studio. And finally I'm like, I don't know, this isn't doing it for me anymore. I don't think there's a whole lot of meaning in this. So that's when I decided to go back to school.
What did you say?
I said to her, Ellie, I'm putting my nylons back on. Yeah. Because, you know, when you make pots, you are full of clay.
The Ease the Day folks are gonna come in here at 2 o'clock.
Good.
So I want to be sensitive to time. I want to ask you if you have a message or something you'd like to share with the people that are listening to you speak.
Well, you know what? I don't presume to give anybody any advice about how to live a life or anything like that, but something that has kind of resonated with me is to embrace life. This is not a rehearsal.
That's very good. That's very good. Hold, please. Okay, any more questions for Jan?
I don't have a question, but I'd like to thank you because his question was, what do we do, any advice, and you eloquently said, I don't tell people what to do, but I think through your storytelling, through showing your vulnerability, you've shown us strength. And it's going to personally help me when I leave this room, so thank you.
You're gonna write about that, right?
That's very sweet. I'm gonna say something, because the crew is lining up outside. I love, so I started off by saying how I knew Jan. And truthfully, I'd see Jan around town and I'd always say, hi Jan, but I never really knew Jan. And so one of the great things about doing this program is I really know Jan now. And I have a connection with Jan that I never imagined that I might have before. And what I feel inside is a much stronger connection to our community. And it makes our community much stronger when we have these bonds. And so my challenge, my message to you is it's fairly easy to take that one person that you don't really see that often, or you see often but don't actually talk to, and ask them questions, or ask them for coffee and ask them a few things about their life. And it's such a strong feeling in me that I know you so much better than I did 2 weeks ago. And so you have the power to do that as well. So Jan, thank you for doing this today. I think you were adverse at first, and
Yes.
and I think we had fun today.
We did.
And Jan Bernath, it was my pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks for asking.
Thanks for saying yes.